Hi, and welcome to part 2. If you recall, in the last time we created a database entity by creating a class with the entity annotation and a primary key field as well as a field for data. And that ends up resulting in a database that looks something like this. We have a database that's the document, and then within the document we have tables which are sort of represented approximately by Excel spreadsheets sheets. So there's actually a couple more steps we need to do in order to have the database work in the project. So in the source, the SRC folder, there's a main folder, and if it's not already there, you need to create a folder called resources. So you should end up with Java, resources, and web app in your source tree. And then you need to create another folder inside of that with the name meta-inf. Just like this, all caps, meta-inf. And hit finish. And then in that, you're actually going to put a file that I've uploaded to GitHub as a gist. And the reason I did this is just to save a little bit of time, and I'll explain what's going on in this later, but just go ahead and copy this. And you're going to name your new file, which is going to be an Excel document, has to be named persistence.xml. So you can see it's going to create in source, main, resources, meta-inf, persistence.xml. Go ahead and hit finish or do whatever your IDE requires. And I'm just going to delete everything that comes inside of it and paste from the gist. So this is the first step. This is telling JPA that I am in fact expecting to access a database, because if we don't have this file, it'll just run an error. It'll throw an error and we'll be in trouble. And the name of the persistence unit, which is a sort of an abstraction, is going to be tutorial, and the property here that's being set is just telling it that the database doesn't exist. So in other words, if we try to save data into an Excel file that doesn't exist, it should just create that Excel file and create the appropriate sheets in it in order for us to put the data into. So that means it'll set up the right columns. It'll tell it which column has which column is the primary key column, etc. And the rest of the properties down here, these are just extras that I included that I think will help you follow along with what's going on. So now that you've finished that, save your persistence.xml file, and we're going to go back to the pom.xml. And we haven't actually touched this since the beginning. So to refresh your memory, if you're looking at the project, the folder that the project's in, you're going to have a bunch of files, and then there's this pom.xml file. So I want you to open that. And then there's this dependencies area in the file. So what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to add another dependency. And you don't typically do this for a real project, but for our purposes, we actually want to add a database into the server. We want to just make it part of the server. So you do that by creating a dependency, and this dependency, so I'm actually just going to copy paste these lines and fix the formatting there. And then instead of JavaX being the group ID, it's going to be com.h2 database, and the artifact ID is going to be h2. And then the version I'm going to use is 1.4.197. And instead of the provided scope, which means don't worry about actually adding it to it, just make sure that it's already there, we're going to use the runtime scope. And now that that's all finished, we should have a database that's part of our project. So flip over to the terminal and run it. Don't forget, it's maven clean, Wildfly-Swarm, run. now that the server is actually running, I'm going to send a request to it. And don't forget, we're on port 8080, as you can see by this line up here. HTTP listening on. And then, again, don't forget that our JakartaEE configuration class has an application path of the root, and the calculator API is just on calculator, so the full URL will just look like this. And we run this, and we get a response, but as you can see in the terminal, we have these few lines here: hibernate, call next value for hibernate sequence. So this is actually something we're getting to see a little bit under the covers here, what's going on. It's looking for an ID, so it's saying, hey, just create an ID in the database for us. So just get a number for that, and then we're inserting a class of type com.airhex.expression into the expression table with the columns expression and ID, and then these values have question marks because basically they're sort of like variables that are going to get replaced by the runtime. So that's pretty exciting, and now we have a working database. So I'm going to pause it here, and we're going to go to part 3 in the next tutorial, and we're going to cover there actually getting data back out of the database and a few other really helpful things. So thanks for watching. See you next time.